Hello, Natasha. It's so great to see you on camera and meet with you. I know it's early morning for both of us. Um, I have today Natasha Rankin, who's with Luna Investments, and she is going to be sharing some of her knowledge regarding commercial real estate and some other things that we are really excited about talking about today. Natasha and I met I don't know, it's probably been at least a month since we first met.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
hmm And, I was really just blown away by your knowledge as far as, your experience so far with real estate. And so I'm excited to interview you today and just see what kind of tips and tricks you have up your sleeve. I know when we first met, we realized that we were kind of in the same realm of work. I do
Mhm.
commercial lending and business banking, so it's a good fit. I think we were meant to be on each
Yeah.
other's radars. So
100%. Yeah.
yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about Luna Investments and kind of what you do? Maybe just a little bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on, first and foremost. My journey in real estate started over 7 years ago now. And it was actually kind of by accident. So I had left a corporate job, realized corporate was not for me, and was deciding what my next move was. And I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't have a business idea. I didn't know how to be an entrepreneur. Everybody in my world was, in a professional setting, so to speak. And I started thinking, I've always been interested in real estate. And long story short, I'm checking Craigslist for jobs, right? And I come across this opportunity with a small commercial real estate company, and they need an admin and marketing assistant. And I'm like, I could do that. And so I go and meet this owner, and I end up taking the job. He hires me. He's leaving a big firm to start his own company, and I just learned from the ground up. I just did everything that he needed to be his kind of right hand, and very quickly I got my brokerage license, and then started doing net lease retail transactions, basically representing buyers and sellers of these $1 million plus commercial deals. And so I always joke that my first real estate mentor I found on Craigslist, because it's true. And it was such an important
Mhm.
relationship in my journey, and that's where it all started. And then I just continued to build from there, and became an investor myself only 2 years ago. So it took me a long time to even realize that I could be in the game as well. So I was a broker representing these clients, very high net worth individuals, and I knew that one day I would be an investor, but for so long it felt like something that was very far into the future, and I just didn't see myself as being able to do that. And I think it was having my first baby, which was in 2020. She was born, and just it shakes up your world, and you really have to reevaluate your life and what you're doing and your goals and all of the things. And it lit a fire, and I realized I need to start investing now. I just need to get in the game. I just need to learn. I need to make all the mistakes and just do the thing. So that's what I did. And I currently own single family homes for my investment portfolio, and looking to add commercial into that mix moving forward, now that I am learning creative finance, thanks to PACE and being in the sub 2 community, and really just going big,
Mhm.
and really using the knowledge that I've built from being a broker, from working on development deals with my past mentor, really knowing the ins and outs of these deals, and finally saying, I'm going to pull up a seat at the table and start investing in those deals myself.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So then, I have to address this because I know the whole time you were talking, the first time I heard you, I was like, where is she from? I got to know that. So I'm sure other people are wondering that as well.
Yeah, so I'm from England originally, from Nottingham.
Okay.
And yeah, born and raised there. And we moved to America when I was 15, just turning 16. So my stepdad is American, and yeah, that's why we, were able to move over and get green cards. And so, funnily enough, we moved from Nottingham, England, to Columbus, Indiana, which is a pretty small town south of Indianapolis. And, it was just like transplanted one day. We didn't even visit before. And so it was quite the world shaker, but it was such a gift. I'm so, so grateful that we made the move and been in the States ever since.
That's awesome. And you live in, is it North Carolina?
No, I live in Indiana.
Oh, you're
So
still
I
in,
went
okay.
I went full circle. So I was planted in Columbus, Indiana, and
Uh-huh.
then I went to university in New York. I got my first corporate job in Columbus, Ohio, and then lived in Indianapolis doing commercial real estate for many years. Lived in Chicago for a year, and then just in January we moved to Columbus near my family because we were having a second baby, and we knew we just wanted to be somewhere where we had a good support system. So I never imagined I was going to move back here, but here we are, however many years later, and it's actually an amazing place to be.
Yeah. Is your family, like your stepdad and mom, still there?
Yeah, and then my sister too. So my sister is
Oh,
married and she has 2 kids. So our kids play, and they literally live. They just bought 15 acres, like 10 minutes down the road from us. So they just moved
that's so
into that
great.
house, and yeah, it's amazing.
Awesome. Well, and I know
Yeah.
you recently had another kiddo, right? Another
Yep.
baby.
She's
So,
11 weeks, so
mhm.
very recent. Yeah.
Yeah, very recent. Well, congrats on, and so they're two girls, right?
Yeah. 2 girls.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, and it's just amazing too when you look at the capacity and what you have done through real estate and what you are doing, as a mom full time and just, really rocking it. So congratulations with that. So what is your main focus right now as far as investing goes?
Yeah. So for investing, my main focus is single family in Indiana. I'll also look at other states in the Midwest. So Tennessee, Ohio, Kentucky, really landlord friendly states, primarily on creative finance. And then also in net lease commercial. So where my bread and butter and experience is on the brokerage side is net lease. So single tenant net lease or small neighborhood strip centers. Really looking for those with a value add opportunity to add into my portfolio. And that again, ideally would be in the Midwest, just so it's driving distance for me to, be boots on the ground for now. And then
Mhm.
down the road, I'm sure I'll be looking further afield.
Yeah. Is
Yeah.
is there a size of property specifically that you're looking for at this point, or does it matter?
Um, it's it depends, but I would say, we're looking at anything from single tenant to your neighborhood strip center with maybe, max 10 tenants in there, not looking at your big box anchored strip centers. So stuff that's like in front of or next to Walmart or Kroger or things like that. Those are kind of out of my scope at this moment in time. I'm looking at
Mhm.
more of, um, you know, the neighborhood strips that are nestled in the suburbs or, on the outer skirts of the city, and not some of those class A, very large scale projects that are kind of 20 million plus.
Right. Well, and some of the I don't know about you guys in Indiana, but here in Denver, some of those large retail centers there's a lot of vacancies in them, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, like the big department stores,
Yeah.
other than the Costco and Sam's Clubs and all those, but some of those big stores I feel like are kind of getting pushed out also. So
Yeah, 100%. And that's the flip side of retail, right? I've got some sun action going on here.
I know it's
The
happy your
sun's been
face.
coming up in my office window. That's the flip side of retail, is that while it's a fantastic, stabilized investment where you have very predictable cash flow by comparison compared to single tenant, or sorry, Single
Single
family,
family.
that's the word. Yes.
Mhm. It's
you
early.
also have somewhat greater risk if one of your tenants leaves who occupies, 30, 40, 50% of your center. That's obviously a huge risk and a huge problem. So a big part of investing in retail is knowing where your resources lie, where your strengths lie, and if you have the relationships for some of those larger tenants, because at the end of the day, it's those retailers, they have real estate managers who they employ, who essentially do all of their lease negotiations and are responsible for, lease renewals and things like that. So you don't want to get in over your head if you don't have access to those types of people, and just kind of knowing where to start versus trying to go for those huge corporate retailers that can be hard to come by as far as relationships.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
definitely something good to think about when you're getting into commercial. What are some other things as far as what you look at when you're looking at a commercial building, or things that you consider when you're looking at purchasing, say, a strip center or something of that sort? So, if we
Mm-hmm.
just use that as an example.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the big things to consider is the type of lease that is in place with the tenant. So you'll hear the phrase net lease thrown around a lot. And that basically refers to the fact that the tenant is responsible for additional expenses as opposed to it all being packaged under the base rent. So that's very advantageous for you as a landlord. However, you want to make sure that you know exactly what that means, because there are different definitions. So you have a double net lease, you have a triple net lease, and then you have an absolute triple net lease. So you want to be sure that you're comparing apples to apples and that you know what you're actually, getting into and what you're actually purchasing, to be clear on what the tenant is responsible for and what they are not responsible for. So in a double net lease situation, the landlord is likely going to be responsible for the roof and structure of the building, and then the tenant would be paying for property taxes, insurance, and then what we would call CAM, which stands for Common Area Maintenance. And that's basically, if you imagine a shopping center, then there's snow removal involved, there's landscaping involved, there's, floodlights in the parking lot, there's the asphalt in the parking lot. Those are all common areas that everybody shares. So the tenant would typically pay a pro rata share of those expenses based on how much space they occupy in the strip center, right? So they're essentially passed through, so the landlord does not have to be responsible for those. But in a double net situation, that's not always the case. So it's not, I don't want to say that there's a blanket for double net. It's just that there are more landlord responsibilities with double net versus triple net. When it's a triple net and you see the three N's, right? Like if you ever see that written out, it's the three capital N's that stands for triple net lease. And that means that all of those things I mentioned, taxes, insurance, common area, is reimbursed and paid by the tenant. You as a landlord may have to front the cost, but then you're going to get reimbursed by the tenant for actual costs. And then an absolute triple net would be 1 degree beyond, which in my experience is typically for single tenant buildings. So if we took a Taco Bell, for example, they may well sign a absolute triple net lease with the landlord, who may have been the developer of the building as well. And that means they're basically going to do everything. And the landlord just collects a check, like purely mailbox money. They're responsible for the building, the grounds, the taxes, the maintenance, like everything. And those are typically, 20, 25-year leases.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So, as you're looking for properties, where do you go to find these properties currently?
Yeah, so generally, what I've always done and what we've always done in the industry is driving around. I know that sounds kind of
Driving
simplistic.
for dollars, I've heard, right?
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
But genuinely, because in retail, right, there are like retail nodes, and there are specific areas of every city or town where retail is clustered. So you want to know where those places are in your particular area. And then you essentially want to, know what you're looking for. So if you're looking for what I'm looking for, which is, a value add opportunity, you might be looking for something that clearly has a little bit of deferred maintenance. Maybe the parking lot's looking a little rough. Maybe, the building's just looking a little worn. And you're looking for something where there's some vacancy. So where there's an opportunity to basically come in, buy at a discount, sign new leases, make some improvements, and stabilize the property, adding value with every tenant that you add. And then ultimately you've created value in that scenario. So really, you're going to drive, you're going to say, oh, that looks interesting. I'll print out an aerial map of where I'm going to go and drive. And then as I'm driving, and I'll just circle the buildings on the map. And then when I come back to my desk, and then I'll look and go and look up the owners of those properties and then call them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And usually I would imagine that the owners of the property are typically businesses, correct? Or the entity is in the name of a business, right? So you'd have to kind of figure out who the owner of the business is and try and locate them that way.
Yeah, and sometimes you do have to dig more than with residential. Sometimes you're surprised where people they do have ownership in their name. Other times you might have to call a tenant and say, I'm trying to get hold of the building owner. And then sometimes they'll tell you, sometimes they won't. Sometimes they'll give you the property manager, and sometimes you have to go peel the onion
dig through that a little bit to figure that out.
But again, it's with commercial, it's less about volume, right? Because there's just not as many opportunities, but each deal is much larger. So it's worth it to spend a little bit of extra time digging to get in touch with the right person to see if they want to sell.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting too that obviously there's space to do creative financing and be able to purchase a building using creative financing. And especially as I do commercial lending, and so when you talk about a building that you can do value add, so adding things to make it make you make more money in the long run.
Right.
But sometimes that's not ideal for an actual loan, so if somebody comes to me and they say, well, the building's half occupied, then that could be a problem, right? As far as cash flow and figuring out whether or not the loan can actually go through. So it's definitely, I feel like creative finance is definitely, one of those ways to obtain properties and be able to make that move and be able to, hopefully get some good deals that way.
Yeah. And I'd love to address that real quick too, as far as that hurdle. If you are looking, because not every deal is going to work for creative, of course, but when it does, it's amazing. But if it doesn't, and you're looking at a more traditional scenario, one of the ways to get around that or, tackle that with retail is that if you can negotiate a long enough due diligence, you can go and secure some tenants for the building before you close. So you can make the deal contingent on being able to secure X number of tenants and essentially give yourself runway to go out and hit the pavement and try and find some tenants to fill those vacancies. And you can essentially, you could either do a signed LOI. The bank may be comfortable if you had a signed LOI. An LOI is non-binding, however, or you could sign a lease with a contingency in the lease that says, this lease is only effective if the landlord is able to close on XYZ property. And as long as everybody's aware of the situation and, eyes wide open going into it, you're not withholding that information from the potential tenant, that can work really well as far as, because of the long kind of deal cycle, right? Tenants aren't moving in tomorrow, generally, especially more established businesses. They're really planning their expansion. So you could sign a lease with them today for them not to even get possession of the premises for 6 to 9 months, and that wouldn't be that out of the ordinary.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Because when you're doing like when I'm doing a loan, that's one thing that I'm asking for are leases that are in place,
Yeah.
and so if those are negotiated and actually figured out before closing, then that guarantees a little bit, definitely better cash flow and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah,
um,
and it works for everybody. You as the landlord, you have a lot more protection, and then obviously for the lender, and yeah, highly recommend exploring that.
yeah, that's really smart. So are there any other tips that you can give as far as, purchasing commercial property? I think it's great that you went and worked for the brokerage and kind of, just figured it out, and
Yeah.
you're learning as you go. And so, what are some of the nuggets that you have learned along the way?
Mm. Yeah, great question. I mean, there's so many, but I would say one of the big things is you just have to start doing, right? And if you have the opportunity to do that with and shadowing somebody who has more experience than you, take it, because it is so valuable to be in the passenger seat of a deal. And I was lucky enough to have that opportunity with my previous mentor where he was doing a ton of development deals and I was basically managing them for him and able to learn like every single step of the process, as if I was the investor, but I wasn't, right? So I got to kind of play that role and learn what everything that needs to go into a deal. So if you have that opportunity, definitely, if you are curious about commercial, follow that nudge and really put yourself in the right space to learn it, because it truly is its own language, its own world. It's very, very different than residential. So if you feel that nudge, really make a conscientious effort to be in that space and find mentors and people that you can learn from through osmosis and really get behind the scenes of a deal, because that is probably the most valuable thing you can do. Even if you make no money for a while, just be willing to get a free education, right? Essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's even more valuable than paying for education, because it's just different when you're actually talking about a real live deal and scenario. So that would be my number one tip. And then as far as looking at your own portfolio and making decisions about what type of investments to add and pursue, I would say make sure you're clear on what phase of wealth creation you are in, because not every deal is a good or a bad deal. For a long time, I thought, well, if this was a good deal, why hasn't somebody else bought it? Right? I thought that I was like missing something, because what's a good deal is a good deal. Turns out that isn't true. What's actually true is what is a good deal for me, based on my goals, based on my knowledge, based on my wealth creation phase that I'm in. And so you want to be really clear on what that looks like for you, so that when you're evaluating deals, you're able to decide, is this type of return a yes for me or a no for me, that might be a yes for somebody else, right? It's not a one size fits all situation.
Right. Yeah, and to be a little bit more specific on that, we're talking about, cash flow versus, like what is important currently in your life for that building, right? Are you okay breaking even? Do you need the cash flow? Do you just want the asset? Do you have
Yeah.
1031 money that you're spending? Like all of those situations are very different.
Right. And also tax depreciation. So somebody who has a lot of other income to offset may be willing to do a commercial project that only breaks even from a cash flow perspective, because they want the depreciation. And of course there are different, accelerated paths that you can take, whether you do a cost segregation, different things that you can work with your tax professional to help you offset your income. Whereas somebody who doesn't have that situation maybe wouldn't bother with a deal like that because they're looking for active cash flow. So again, exactly what you said, just really breaking it down as far as the differences in your situation between cash flow versus, long-term appreciation versus taxes, 1031, etc.
Mm-hmm. No,
Yeah.
that's great. Well, Natasha, I really, really appreciate you jumping on with me this morning. I know that you are super busy, and I really admire what you've done and how you are working on everything currently. And hopefully, you and I can do some stuff together down the
Yes.
line. I look forward to that.
Yes, I would love that. And, you're so welcome. I love nothing more than sharing and helping other people, get started and figure out their path. And it's such a rewarding industry to be in because there really is no limit. We're going to be learning forever. And that's what makes it fun and exciting and interesting. And thanks to people like you who are really creating a platform to share and make education available is so important, especially in commercial when it can feel so daunting. So if anybody who is watching, is curious and wants to reach out to have a conversation, I'm more than happy to, because I know that it can feel challenging to know where to start in the commercial space specifically.
Yeah, and do you have an Instagram page, or like how can people follow you or find you?
Yeah, so the best place to find me is on Instagram at the Natasha Rankin. So just the first name, last name. I've not been very active on there for the last 10 weeks while I've had new baby,
Uh-huh.
but I'm sure I'll be returning to that space soon. And then if you want to shoot me an email, you could also just email me, Natasha at lunainvestmentgroup.com. And that's Luna spelled Luna, investmentgroup.com. And we can set up some time and hop on a call and connect that way too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. As I said, I really appreciate you, and I'm excited to see what your journey brings you as well.
Yes, likewise, Renee. Well, thank you so much for holding the space. And I look forward to doing some business together soon.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right.